There are 3 levels, like 3 stories of this city, and the deepest one is some 30 meters below ground level. Everything is cut in the bedrock. Before it got sealed down for the public and for researchers, few maps were made which don't match at all with each other. Here in this video you can find all details of what kind of dead ends did the Russians face anywhere they tried to visit or to obtain any information or on what is logged by whom and why. There are currently excavations going on. None of the information is published. They bribed one of the guards who gave them a shot of the map used by the people who dig, and that had nothing to do with the public maps available. The only thing they could find out so far is that it is the size of a city, endless corridors and halls, and objects and structures, the exact application of which would be highly unclear. And actually, the normal guards of the site, even they have access to very limited area. Basically, they guard the entrance, but they're not allowed to see what's inside. They could find an information about experiment which was conducted not exactly from this underground city, but another one. They actually poured water in a tunnel which they suspected ends up at the Giza pyramid, and the water did come out on the other side. Now the distance covered by the water was 600 kilometers. Now this underground complex, an entire city below the relatively modest for Egyptian standards pyramid, is just one of the many examples. I picked it up randomly. There are other underground complexes in the land of Osiris. But the most people, they don't even get to the point of hearing what is the main point of the full site. They are shown the gate, which is the relatively simple pyramid on the top. And then the real thing inside, the size of a city, this doesn't even get to the discussion table. And this is not because the people are innocent victims of some sort of gang which hides things from them without people's consent. No, it is the people we voluntarily elect. And they will continue doing it because that's their nature. They are not going to change. If any change is about to come, it has to come from our side. And the only way is to stop being so superficial when we vote. So all these endless corridors of this and many other underground structures in the land of Osiris, these are clearly not residential quarters. Their shape doesn't at all resemble some sort of a simple hiding place as well, what to speak of the size. Some parts of them could be blamed to have been burial chambers, but this is usually an exception. So from what we can conclude from the whatever translations we can make of the hieroglyphs, this seems to be some sort of places for magical rituals. In modern language, that would be like harvesting cosmic energies, which is the very same thing. And many people are just curious and want to know more about how to use these cosmic energies, but don't understand a basic rule in this game, which is that these energies are conscious themselves and they deliberately choose to hide from us because we think that we are good people and we have good intentions, but the deities, the masters of this energy, they don't think so, And if you don't believe me, hopefully you will believe a top-level magician, and that's about to come later in this video. This is the pyramid at Abu Rawash. Not so many people visit. The entry fee seems to be extremely high. It is definitely worth seeing because the insides are laid barren, exposed. Either the full thing never got completed or it was destroyed. The site is a good illustration of what kind of rock cutting was going on in the land of Osiris. Now, the underground part is obviously very, very deep, and above ground level, 6 meters of the pyramid, they are rock cut with some stones glued on the sides to give it some sort of visually pleasing shape. Basically, a very wide trench was dug out around the pyramid, and that's why the impression is created that it starts at ground level. Actually, it doesn't. It starts some 6 meters below ground level, but the platform around it is so big that the impression is created that the pyramid stands at ground level. And again, it is just one of the countless examples of rock cutting in Egypt. There is much more. The architectural style of some of the rock-cut stuff in the land of Osiris definitely resembles the styles of what I have been referring to as the Deronquiu style rock-cut ruins, like for example this rectangular pool, and even more noticeably things like this. I mean, this is like one-to-one a so-called Etruscan rock-cut tomb or Lycian from Turkey. Here more typically Etruscan so-called rock tombs, but in Egypt. And since most people have been already successfully brainwashed that rock cut means primitive, this makes it very easy to just lock up everything, and people seem to be okay with that. Next, I'm gonna review two very popular modern ideas. First of all, that there was an advanced ancient civilization which came to an end somehow, and then the dynastic pharaohs, they built their pyramids on the top of the ruins which they inherited. And the second one is that it's very similar. It's kind of an addition to the first idea, and it's about the allegedly water erosion on the Sphinx, which allegedly points to the fact that it is at least 12,000 years old. Let's start with the first concept, that there were advanced beings, somehow they disappeared, and then when the familiar and known, allegedly, dynasties of ancient Egypt came, they just made an use of the ruins they found. This idea has gained lots of popularity because it is simplistic. People don't have to strain their minds, so they accept it. It sounds somewhat better than the usual penguin nonsense, so let's go for this. Now, as far as confirmations from the actual historic sites about this scenario, they're close to zero. Indeed, exactly the opposite is to be observed. We see a gradual devolution, gradual loss of knowledge, coming in various layers rather than the high-tech stuff below and then strictly one simple layer on the top. Actually, in some cases, the Russians who spend there really lots of time, big groups, they go regularly, they really study meticulously. And from them I have heard that the situation is really not as simple. In some cases, they said we see a pyramid of really raw mud bricks as primitive as you can imagine. And then on the top of that, you have a casing which is high tech, like sparkling, polished, perfect gaps between the stones. Or in other cases, and I've been showing that in previous videos, we have in the same structure next to each other stones. Half of them are high-tech and half of them are like really primitive, and it's not that they're side by side, not the better ones on the lower layer. Baalbek is yet another site where this type of situation is clearly visible. High-tech work next to really stones with chisel marks. Another example, one out of the many. In this video, a sarcophagi or whatever box is shown. It's made of a basalt and it's very smoothly polished. Now this is a very hard stone. There is no way this type of polishing and precision of work could have been achieved with the tools attributed to dynastic Egypt. And yet the person depicted is with typical dynastic Egyptian looks. In reality, all this confusion arises from our naive trust in the mainstream history. We just blindly believe them that dynastic Egypt was the way they tell us, and that's why they could not have created these things. In reality, if we stop believing the liars and realize that the times of dynastic Egypt were radically different from what we were misled to believe, then that will be the first step in finding out the true history of this period. Okay, next, is the Sphinx at least 12,000 years old because of the water erosion marks on it? First of all, are these typical water erosion marks? Yes, most definitely they are. But yet on sites like Petra, we see typical water erosion marks, and yet in one of the previous videos I showed you the river of stone caught petrified as it was flowing. So what kind of weapon or power did melt the stone and at the same time leave also typical water erosion marks? I don't know, but the conclusion is not everything that is typical water erosion is surely water erosion. Second, is the Sphinx older than the pyramid? Well, most obviously. It appears that it has been dressed with pyramid-style stone blocks after it eroded. But this comparison by itself is almost meaningless as such, because the pyramid itself, it has numerous layers of repair, some of which could be much more recent than we are inclined to think. For example, we have preserved wood. I'm not sure if this photograph is exactly from the Great Pyramid, but it's definitely from structures dating to that period. And I mean, of course the Sphinx is in general much older than the pyramid, or at least its part above ground, because rock cut is usually always older